The knock wasn't aggressive. Firm. Measured. Professional. 3 sharp taps on the front door, spaced just enough to let me know whoever stood outside expected compliance, not conversation. I glanced at the time. Early afternoon. No noise complaints. No visitors scheduled. No reason for police to be at my door. Except the HOA. I took my time walking over. Not to be dramatic, just unhurried. Calm has a way of unsettling people who expect urgency. When I opened the door, 2 officers stood on the porch. One younger, hand resting loosely near his belt. The other older, eyes scanning the entryway automatically, taking in details without staring. "Sir," the older one began, "we received a call regarding." He stopped mid-sentence. Both of them did. Their posture changed in the same instant. Shoulders tightened. The younger officer's hand dropped away from his belt. The older one leaned back half a step, eyes narrowing. Not in suspicion, but recognition. I didn't say anything yet. I just stood there. Behind me, clearly visible through the open door, were framed documents on the wall. Licenses. Certifications. A badge, not a police one, mounted beside a folded flag in a shadow box. The older officer swallowed. He said carefully, recalibrating. "Are you Mr. _____?" I nodded once. The younger officer glanced at his partner, then back at me, then down at the notepad in his hand like it might suddenly contain better instructions. "Yes," I said. "That's me." Silence stretched. Not awkward, alert. The older officer cleared his throat. "We were told there was a situation involving noncompliance with HOA directives." I waited. He shifted his weight. "Before we go any further, sir, are you currently affiliated with the state?" I finished for him. Another pause. "Yes," he said. "I am," I replied. "And this is my residence." The younger officer exhaled slowly through his nose. That was when I knew. Whatever story the HOA had told them on the phone, whatever urgency they'd tried to manufacture, it had just collided with something they hadn't anticipated. Paperwork, jurisdiction, and a homeowner who knew exactly how this was supposed to work. The older officer closed his notebook. "Mind if we step back and clarify a few things before proceeding?" he asked. I smiled, not smug, just steady. "Of course," I said. "You might want to call this one in." And as they turned toward the steps, radios already coming to life, I realized the HOA's plan had unraveled the moment I opened the door. They'd expected intimidation. What they'd triggered instead was caution. And for people who rely on authority without understanding it, that shift is where everything starts to fall apart. The older officer stepped a few feet down the walkway, turning slightly so his radio wasn't broadcasting directly toward me. The younger one stayed put, posture now noticeably neutral, no authority stance, no edge. Just waiting. I could hear fragments through the open door. "Yeah, homeowner answers, credentials visible, yes, that agency, no, nothing hostile." HOA complaint. There was a pause. Then a longer one. I leaned casually against the doorframe. Not defensive. Not welcoming. Just present. The younger officer finally spoke. "Sir, the HOA reported you were refusing to comply with an enforcement order and that there was concern about escalation." I nodded. "Did they mention what the order was?" He glanced at his notes. "Something about unauthorized use of your own property. A structure violation." I almost laughed, but didn't. "That structure predates the HOA by 23 years, I said evenly. "And they've already been informed of that. In writing." The older officer came back up the steps, radio clipped back into place. His tone had changed completely. "All right," he said. "We're just going to reset this for a moment." Reset was a good word. He asked for permission to see the documents on the wall, not because he doubted them, but because protocol demanded confirmation. I stepped aside and let them look. Licenses, IDs, letters, everything current, everything legitimate. The younger officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "Understood," he said quietly. The older officer nodded once. "That explains the discrepancy." "Which discrepancy?" I asked. The one between what we were told, he replied, and what's actually enforceable. I asked them if the HOA had provided any court order, citation, or emergency directive. They hadn't. Just a request for police presence to compel compliance. The older officer sighed. We can't do that. Did you tell them that? I asked. He looked me straight in the eye. We're about to. He stepped back again and keyed the radio, this time clearly. No lowered voice. No shielding. Dispatch, this is Unit 3 to 12. HOA complaint is civil. No violation observed. Homeowner is compliant with all applicable law. We're clearing. The word clearing landed hard. The younger officer relaxed visibly. The tension, the kind manufactured by half-truths and urgent phone calls, evaporated. Before they left, the older officer turned back to me. Just so you're aware, he said, they're probably not done trying. I nodded. I didn't think they would be. He gave a faint, knowing smile. If they call again, it'll be on record. That was the part the HOA never understands. You only get to cry wolf so many times before the system starts documenting you. As they walked back to their cruiser, lights never having been turned on, I watched the calm return to the street. The HOA had tried to borrow authority. Instead, they'd put themselves on file. And once that happens, every future move gets watched a little more closely by people who don't appreciate being used as leverage. The HOA didn't call again that day. That alone told me they'd realized something had gone wrong. By evening, the emails started coming in. Polite on the surface. Careful with language. No more threats, just requests for clarification and opportunities to resolve the misunderstanding. The tone had shifted from command to negotiation. That shift never happens unless someone panics quietly. I opened the HOA portal and downloaded everything. Notices. Violation letters. Fee statements. Even the original complaint that triggered the police call. They hadn't expected me to ever see that. Big mistake. The report described me as non-compliant, uncooperative, and refusing lawful directives. None of it referenced statutes. None of it cited ordinances. It was all authority theater, language designed to scare, not stand. I forwarded the entire bundle to my attorney. He replied within 20 minutes. They involved police without cause, he wrote. That changes things. It always does. When private organizations escalate civil disputes into law enforcement encounters, they cross a line. Not legally, at first, but strategically. Because now there's an official record. Names. Times. Statements. And contradictions. The next morning, I requested a copy of the dispatch logs. Perfectly routine. Perfectly allowed. And devastating if you know what you're looking for. The HOA had told dispatch there was an active refusal and potential safety concern. Neither officer observed anything close. That discrepancy mattered. By noon, the HOA president sent a message asking for a private discussion to clear the air. I declined, politely, in writing, and asked that all communication go through counsel. Silence followed. Then, 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. They were withdrawing the violation. No apology. No admission. Just a quiet retreat wrapped in formal language. But the damage was already done to them. Because now I had proof they'd attempted to use police presence as an enforcement tool. That they'd misrepresented facts. That they'd done it knowingly. And most importantly, that the officers themselves had recognized the misuse and documented it. I filed a formal complaint, not against the police, but referencing the incident. Neutral. Factual. Boring. Those are the ones that stick. The HOA didn't respond. They didn't have to. They'd learned something far more uncomfortable than resistance. They'd learned restraint. From that point on, their letters stopped using words like must and immediately. Meetings that once ignored me suddenly included agenda slots labeled homeowner concerns. Emails CC'd legal counsel automatically. They weren't backing down because they'd become reasonable. They were backing down because they'd seen what happens when fake authority runs into real process. The police hadn't panicked because of who I was. They'd panicked because the HOA had put them in a position they didn't belong in. And once that line is crossed, everyone involved starts paying much closer attention. 2 weeks later, the HOA held an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, which was fine because the agenda leaked anyway. Item 3. Legal exposure following improper enforcement action. That phrasing wasn't accidental. Lawyers choose words the way surgeons choose instruments. Carefully, minimizing damage while acknowledging reality. By then, the neighborhood had started talking. People noticed the patrol car that never issued a citation, the sudden withdrawal of violations, the abrupt tone shift in HOA emails. Rumors filled the gaps the board refused to explain. And rumors spread faster than authority ever does. The HOA president tried to regain control. She sent a community-wide message reminding residents that the board works in partnership with local authorities. No mention of my name. No mention of the call. Just a vague attempt to reclaim legitimacy. It didn't work. One homeowner replied all, asking why police had been called over a landscaping dispute. Another asked whether HOA dues were being used for legal consultations. A third asked, simply, are we liable now? That was the question that changed everything. Because once residents start thinking about liability, loyalty disappears. The board scrambled. A new email went out within an hour, this one urging calm and unity. The comments were disabled. Too late. I received a call from a board member I'd never spoken to before. Her voice was tight, rehearsed. We'd like to formally acknowledge a misunderstanding, she said, and ensure it doesn't happen again. I'm sure you would, I replied. You might want to put that in writing. There was a pause. We can do that. They did. The letter arrived the next day. It confirmed the HOA had no enforcement authority over my property. It stated that no further action would be taken. And it included a single sentence that mattered more than the rest. The association regrets involving law enforcement in a civil matter. That line wasn't for me. It was for their insurer. Because now, if anything similar happened again, the record would show a pattern, not a mistake. The HOA president resigned that Friday. No announcement. No explanation. Just her name quietly removed from the board page. The replacement was cautious. Measured. Almost invisible. Exactly the kind of person who doesn't make phone calls to the police unless someone's actually in danger. From that point forward, enforcement became suggestion. Deadlines became requests. And my property stopped appearing on violation lists entirely. The power hadn't shifted because I raised my voice. It shifted because the system had been forced to look at itself and didn't like what it saw. And once that happens, authority either corrects course or it collapses under its own documentation. The street returned to normal. No patrol cars. No notices taped to doors. No emails marked urgent. Just trimmed lawns, closed garage doors, and the familiar rhythm of people minding their own business again. That's how you know it's over. The HOA still exists, technically. They still send newsletters. Still remind people about paint colors and trash bins. But something fundamental changed after that day. They stopped pretending they were the law. I never heard from the officers again, but I didn't need to. Their report sat quietly in a system that values accuracy over emotion. And the HOA knew it was there. That knowledge alone was enough. Occasionally, a neighbor would ask me what really happened. I never went into detail. I'd just say, they made a call they shouldn't have. That was always enough. Because everyone understands that kind of mistake. Months later, I received a letter confirming the HOA had updated its enforcement policy. There was new language about avoiding unnecessary escalation and respecting jurisdictional boundaries. No names. No references. Just correction. That's what real accountability looks like. Not public punishment. Not dramatic endings. Just systems quietly adjusting to avoid repeating an error. I framed nothing. Posted nothing. Didn't tell the story online. I didn't need to. The goal was never to win. It was to stop something from happening again. And that's the part people miss when they talk about power. The strongest move is rarely the loudest one. It's the one that leaves no room for argument, no appetite for retaliation, and no incentive to test you again. The HOA had tried to use authority it didn't understand. The police had recognized it instantly. And in the end, the only thing that really changed was this. They learned where their reach ended. And I got my quiet back. Which, in situations like this, is the only victory that lasts.